Hey friends, welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be painting something that brings me a lot of joy. So my last video I posted was a similar piece. I painted a wolf with these orchids kind of emerging from its fur. And when I painted that piece, it made me realize that I so desperately wanted to expand upon this series and basically paint a bunch of animals that are having this sort of botanical growth coming out of them. And the more I think about it, the more I think it's kind of a reflection of what's going on inside my head right now. A craving of growth and chasing that, and also a little bit of getting back to nature. These pieces to me feel like a little bit of a throwback to the younger Danny when she was really exploring some weird and cool stuff with her art. I would create a lot of art of these realistic animals that had different things morphing out of them. My medium of choice at the time was mostly ink, so I've got a lot of really cool pieces that I still hold near and dear to my heart of, realistic animals with different things morphing out of them, whether it was other animals morphing out of them. Some favorites of mine were birds or butterflies kind of bursting forth from other animals, merging with their fur, or different plants. And I genuinely love that art that I created. It's one of the few things when, you look back at your artwork from years ago, and most of the time you cringe like crazy because the hopes is you've grown a lot since that time, and typically looking back on your older work, it's cringy. You're like, oh, I could do so much better now. But these pieces feel like such a genuine part of my soul as an artist and a person that likes weird things. And looking back on those pieces, it inspires me so much. So I think subconsciously I was craving a little bit of that flowiness, freedom, blending realistic animals with some weird stuff. And as a result, I could not be happier with this series that I'm working on. So this is number 2 in the series, a snow leopard with some beautiful flowers morphing out of its fur, a big, weird, glowing lily, all that good stuff. So with this piece here, I started with a nice wash of brown acrylic paint. I don't really like working on a white canvas, especially if I'm going to be painting something that kind of has like white fur to it. Snow leopard is kind of like a pale gray. So I gave it a dilute wash of acrylic paint just so I didn't have to struggle with painting on a white surface, and then started jumping in with my oil paint. This series up until this point has been a bit of a different way that I approach things. So typically I jump in with a lot more color, but for this particular series, it felt really good to build a sort of more detailed underpainting that's very monochromatic, especially since there's a lot of darkness here. There's a lot of heavy darkness. That background is super dark. And the reason why I love that is because having that really dark background makes everything else pop. And especially since I was going to have a glowing element in here. I've got, parts of the lily that are glowing, but I just wanted to bring a lot more drama and some really gorgeous shadows and stuff. So having a really dark background just makes it that much easier. But back what I was talking about, starting with a more detailed underpainting. Basically working monochromatically. I do have a little bit of color in here. I've got some burnt umber, but basically my palette up until the point where I start glazing is basically just ivory black, titanium white, and burnt umber, with a bit of liquid original as my painting medium. And I've personally found this approach to it really freeing. It allowed me to focus on building really powerful values instead of worrying about color and different things like that. And it was just a really refreshing way to work. I can't wait to keep playing around with this. And because I was, focusing on those values with my underpainting, not worrying about, too much color, it just reminded me of the absolute magic that is glazing with oil paint. Or you can do it with acrylics as well, but I'm working with oils. But glazing with oils is like one of my favorite things in the world. You'll see it a little on in this video for sure, but it feels like magic. You can, pour all your heart into this underpainting, work on all your detail, build some really great values, give it all sorts of drama and life, and kind of having it a little bit more monochromatic at that point. But then through glazes, you can add all this like rich, beautiful color. You can shift your shadows, add all this, gorgeous drama, and not have it obscure any of the layers below. Feels a little bit magical. So yeah, with this piece here, I'm working in multiple layers. So I'm not great at working with alla prima, especially with detail. I like to let my painting dry in between and then, onto that dry layer, adding more detail. So this entire painting that you're looking at here from start to finish, I did in about 5 sittings, letting it dry completely in between. And I love that technique because it just allows you to build things up more easily, I find. Okay. The magic of glazing, we're into it right now. You can see here that I'm able to add this gorgeous wash of color to things super easily using my favorite medium of all time, Liquid Original by Winsor & Newton, mixing it with a tiny bit of transparent paint. So for the green, I'm using sap green. Here on that little kitty nose, I am basically using a tiny bit of alizarin crimson and some burnt sienna here. These eyes, oh, I love the way this looks here with a little bit of sap green, a little bit of blue. I love it. It just makes it so easy. So yeah, you can see how it's just really coming to life with that glaze layer. And I ended up letting this glaze layer dry and then did another one in a couple of areas just to add a little bit more drama, and then I can add some more details. So here into that wet glaze layer, I'm just kind of adding a little bit of detail here and there. And now it's time for some whiskers. I am working on a dry surface at this point, so I put it aside for a few days for that glaze layer to dry completely, and grabbing one of the teeny tiniest little brushes I have, trying my best to have a steady hand, which is a struggle for me. I have very shaky hands, and trying to get in some of those whiskers. If you struggle with painting things like whiskers too, one of my biggest tips is to thin out your paint a little bit more with, if you're working with oils, paint thinner instead of medium. If you're working with acrylics, use water. And this I find gives it a more watery consistency, and it like skips over any surface texture, giving you a much more smooth, solid line. Whereas medium, you're going to struggle a little bit more. So just a little tip if you're painting things like whiskers or just super fine hair. All right, so now is the point where I'm just kind of adding a little bit more detail here and there, adding a little bit more color with my glazes, just kind of standing back a little bit and seeing where things are calling me a little bit, and just adjust as your heart sees fit. This can be one of the trickiest parts of the painting, honestly, because it is so difficult to know when to stop sometimes, and you can very much overdo a painting. You can overwork it, and it kind of falls apart at the seams. So it's definitely a struggle every single time to be able to find that perfect moment to stop. Thank you so much for watching this. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and it's kind of fun to just talk about art as we're watching it come together. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.